Hello, today we're going to talk about wisdom and courage. We won't be spending as much time on these topics as some of the other topics that we'll be covering during our course, but I did want to talk with you a little bit today about this area. As you already know, wisdom and courage are considered virtues, and we have already looked at how important the idea of virtues is to positive psychology. In fact, it's one of the three main areas that are studied in positive psychology, the other two being positive emotions and positive institutions. We have already considered how virtues, including wisdom and courage and various others, are talked about in various types of religious literature, both from the East and also from the West, and how these virtues are believed to improve personal functioning as well as the well-being of communities. You have already taken the VIA survey and identified strengths associated with the six virtues that are measured by way of those strengths by that particular instrument, and you're working on giving expression to some of those virtues in your daily living throughout this course. I want to share with you a definition of wisdom that you won't find in your book, but that I really like. One person defined wisdom as expert knowledge in the practical aspects of life. Expert knowledge in the practical aspects of life. And in our readings, Sternberg makes a distinction between intelligence and wisdom. And he gives an example I'd like to share with you because this example helps me to better appreciate the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Sternberg says that intelligence permits people to invent the atom bomb, while wisdom prevents them from using it. So I'd like to share with you a touching, funny example of wisdom to help us appreciate how wisdom plays out in our daily lives. Mark McMinn, M-C-M-I-N-N, wrote this great little book called The Science of Virtue, where he looks at what psychology has to offer the church and what the church has to offer psychology in the study of virtue, the science of virtue. If you're ever interested in doing more reading in the field of positive psychology, I would encourage you to read Dr. McMinn's book. It's quite excellent. So he tells a story in this book of an experience that he and his wife had with their children, where he was driving home from work one day and saw a cat lying on the side of the road. The cat had been killed by a car running over it. The cat appeared to be their family cat. So he picked up the cat and took it home. And he told his wife what had happened. And they talked at length about how they would tell their girls, they were young, and what they would do about it. So they eventually told their girls what had happened. They used it as an opportunity to answer their girls' questions about death. And they had a burial for the cat in the backyard. They spent a good bit of time thinking about and talking with each other about this before even discussing it with their girls, trying to figure out the best way to go about it. And after they told their girls, they kept channels of communication open so they could help their girls with their questions and with their feelings about losing their cat. Well, a few days later, when the parents had some friends over to their home, one of the little girls ran into the room and announced that their cat was at the back door. So they ran to the back door to see what was going on, and sure enough, there was their family cat. So the cat by the side of the road looked like their family cat, but wasn't actually their family cat. Touching story, but it helps us to think about how wisdom plays out in our daily lives. And I'm sure that you have many experiences in your daily life where you need to figure out the best way to handle things. And when you do that, you are demonstrating wisdom. So when I was a psychology intern, I had the opportunity to do a rotation at a center for the treatment of addiction. And at that center, they used the Serenity Prayer. They recited it in every meeting. They took a 12-step approach to treatment at the center where I had the opportunity to work in Minneapolis. And that's when I was introduced to the Serenity Prayer. I love the Serenity Prayer because it relates to both wisdom and courage. And I find it useful in my daily life, and have used it throughout my life since learning it when I was a young man. It goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I find myself in difficult situations where I need to apply the Serenity Prayer, I can trip myself up very easily because I try to focus on changing things over which I have no control. And that often involves the behavior of other people. So when we can accept what we cannot change, that can help lead us towards serenity. And when we work on changing what we can, that can be a courageous process. And knowing the difference between those two areas is what wisdom hopefully allows. So I would like to encourage you to commit the Serenity Prayer to memory, if you don't know it already, and look at ways in which you can apply it in your life. One area of, controversy about the Serenity Prayer is figuring out to whom we should give credit for that prayer. And many people believe it was Reinhold Niebuhr who contributed that prayer. He was a famous theologian in the 20th century, I believe. In considering courage, I would like to talk with you briefly about the story of Malala Yousafzai. You'll find her in our readings, and I provided you with an interview of Malala done by Ellen DeGeneres, which is really excellent. You may know the story of Malala already, but at the age of 14, while riding home from school on the bus one day in Pakistan, a Taliban assassin got on the bus, walked up to Malala, shot her 2 times point blank, once in the head and once in the neck. She survived that. And the reason why they were trying to assassinate Malala was because she was a strong advocate for the education of girls and women, even at that young age. She went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of, I believe, around 18. And the story of how she was notified about winning the Nobel Peace Prize is quite funny and touching. And when you watch the interview, you'll have a chance to hear her talk about it firsthand. Well, she's continued to this day to be a strong advocate for the education of girls and women in that part of the world. And I would encourage you to consider what kind of courage she demonstrated and continues to demonstrate in her life. To provide you with a framework for thinking about that, what kind of courage Malala demonstrates, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about Kristen O'Byrne's theory of courage. You'll find her discussed in our readings. And O'Byrne talks about 3 kinds of courage: physical, moral, and vital. Physical courage is the kind of courage that is demonstrated when we place ourselves in harm's way to protect others. Think about the work of police officers, firefighters, emergency medical technicians, soldiers who risk their own lives to protect the rest of us. These are people who demonstrate physical courage. Of course, others may demonstrate physical courage as well, but these are people who demonstrate it quite often. Moral courage has to do with our willingness to take a stand, to advocate for justice and fairness. We can do it in our daily lives by standing up for people who may be mistreated, by not letting an inappropriate joke that may be told at the expense of somebody else go by without commenting on it, to advocate for people who may not have a strong voice, who need others to stand up for them, or to fight for causes for, say, social justice. These would all be examples of demonstrating moral courage. Doing the right thing involves moral courage. And finally, there is vital courage. And vital courage has to do with our ability to persevere through a disease or a disability, even when we're not sure what the outcome is going to be. And vital courage is not just limited to patients, but it also applies to caregivers and relatives of patients who hang in there with them and help them through the process. So I would like to ask you to think about examples of people you know personally or know of who demonstrate these 3 kinds of courage: physical, moral, and vital. And as we think about people who are good examples of these three kinds of courage, they can inspire us to hopefully conduct our lives more courageously as well. Thank you, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.